Federal government to embark on diagnostic assessment of refineries, pipelines and depots across the country as it seeks more U.S. capital for infrastructure. Fresh vessel standards for oil industry. Who sets them? Plus, former IMF chief Christine Lagarde resumes office as European Central Bank president. Details of these and more on Business Express, reaching you from Abuja, the nation's capital, and I am Muplang Dakok. President Muhammadu Buhari has met with the United States Treasury Secretary to request for additional capital from the U.S. development finance institutions to upgrade critical infrastructure in Nigeria. Presidential spokesman Garba Shehu in a statement said both men who met in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, had positive discussions on investments in Nigeria under the new United States International Development Finance Corporation, which provides $60 billion for investments in developing nations. The statement also added that Nigeria would leverage on this U.S. facility to address current challenges confronting its power sector, as well as the general upgrade of infrastructure. The federal government says Nigeria's energy company will soon embark on an assessment of refineries, pipelines, depots, and other infrastructure across the country to ascertain the level of collaboration with the Aramco, Saudi Arabia's energy company. President Buhari said this when he met with the chairman of Aramco and governor of Public Investment Fund, Yasir Al-Rumayyan, on the margins of the Future Investment Initiative in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where he reiterated the need to improve the efficiency of the oil and gas industry in Nigeria.
We're going to set up teams. What we have agreed is that we're going to set up teams on our side and on their side, and we will discuss further. They are coming to Nigeria to look at the refineries and the state of affairs of the pipelines, and then we'll take it up from there. Next year, first quarter, we are starting with the rehabilitation of Port Harcourt refinery, and I believe that by second quarter, we would have made some good progress towards the rehabilitation of Kaduna refinery as well. You know, one of the promises the president made on second-term election, is to ensure that we have our refineries working again. Because as you all know as Nigerians, if those refineries are working, our expenditure on subsidy will reduce. And that's really what we are pursuing.
Plans are underway by the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board, NCDMB, in partnership with Oil Producers Trade Section to develop oil and gas industry marine vessel standards. The Executive Secretary, NCDMB, Simbi Wambote, who stated this in Abuja, explained that the standards will be applied in marine tenders by all oil and gas operators and will specify uniform technical specifications that must be met by marine vessels that will work in the oil and gas industry. The conceptualization of the standards will have inputs from relevant stakeholders and will enhance business opportunities for marine operators and stimulate capacity building, efficient maintenance of vessels, and optimum service delivery. Now, more than 19 billion naira has been approved for players in the cotton value chain in the country to enable them offtake and process their farm produce. Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele, at a meeting with members of the cotton, textile and garment industry, says it is targeted at meeting the desire to attain self-sufficiency. Chimobi Walter Naji now reports.
To ensure confidence in the local manufacturing of clothes and garments in Nigeria, the Central Bank of Nigeria is taking another step in its resolve to resuscitate Nigeria's cotton, textile and garment industries through the signing of a memorandum of understanding between the bank, cotton growers and heads of military and paramilitary agencies to ensure the sustainability of the project and uninterrupted growth of the sector.
You will agree that we have arrived at the juncture where we are opportune to establish a closer collaboration and ties to leverage on each other's strengths to spearhead patronage of our local textile and garment factories in procurement of uniforms going forward. To ensure confidence in the capacity of our local textile and garment factories, teams from the CBN and the armed forces and uniform services visit the factories to ascertain their capacities to meet the huge demand.
Before now, over $4 billion is lost annually in Nigeria to smuggling of these products, including rice and other items. Now, this initiative by the Central Bank of Nigeria has helped in putting a stop to the illegal activity.
Worried by the unappealing state of the nation's cotton, textile and garment sector, the federal government, through the Central Bank of Nigeria, is trying to wade in by injecting intervention funds into the cotton, textile and garments value chain. To discuss more on the potential inherent in the sector and powering the cotton value chain is Anibe Achumogu, President of the National Cotton Association of Nigeria. Thank you very much for coming on Business Express
today. Thank you for having me.
Okay. So we know that the land borders are still closed.
Yes.
And the president is insisting on local or consumption of locally produced goods, while the central bank is injecting the funds to make it happen. So what do you make of that?
Well, I think it's a good move. I say that because I believe that we have to do all we can, possibly best, to ensure that our own local industries are protected and our own local industries are encouraged to continue to produce. And it's not so much as protectionism, but the fact is the fact. And it's not only that we have closed because of we want to protect our industries and whatnot, but that the rules guiding at least the protocol, ECOWAS protocol, apparently some of these our neighboring countries are not adhering to them. Okay.
So what would you make, or what would you say about Nigeria's cotton production capacity? And then is there any impact or effect of climate change on its production?
Yeah, first and foremost, I would say that cotton production in Nigeria was upwards of 600, 700,000 metric tons per season in the early 70s and 80s. But unfortunately, like last year, all we recorded was about 80,000 metric tons. Now, when you come to the potentials of the production, we can even do a lot more than the 700,000 metric tons because we have the farmers, the land is available, and we'll say relatively the weather is also favorable to cotton production. Okay. But of course, climate change is a factor that we cannot ignore. And for instance, we noticed that the farming season, we could have actually perhaps stretched it a bit into August. Commence farming in August, because we're still experiencing rains, whereby maybe several years ago, the rains would have ceased by now. Of course, we've also experienced some flooding in some areas that traditionally would not have been expecting to worry about flooding. So it has impacted, but I think that I wouldn't say it's too negative, so to speak.
Okay, let's talk about the cotton farmers.
Yes.
What is their status as it is, and then what is their motivation, and also the market space that they have?
Well, first and foremost, I would say that I can only speak about the past, immediate past, like last year. I think the farmers would have been very discouraged, not very interested in continuing to farm cotton. But I think with the intervention of the CBN under the Anchor Borers program, where farmers were promised that they will receive farming inputs, and that was actually received by them, I think they're in a better place right now.
Okay.
I'll also say that the market space,
Yes.
the farmers are not left on their own, so to speak.
Okay.
There is the CBN has already mapped farmers to certain granaries. Okay. So the farmer doesn't really need to worry about where will I sell and what price will I sell at. So I think generally speaking, we're on a right track.
How have these granaries, how have they been helping out?
Well, the granaries, to be honest, you know, not just maybe the granaries, the textile garment companies, we have to, you know, really commend a lot of them that are under the obvious challenges in production in Nigeria. They have tried to keep their factories open. Of course, capacity utilization is low, but they've kept open. And those that have closed had no choice but to close. So I would say that GINAs, for instance, have always assisted farmers, because without the farmers, they will not have a business. Their only feedstock is raw cotton, seed cotton. So they have been supporting farmers in terms of making inputs available where they can, making seed available where they can, offering training and so on where they can. And these are critical components to ensure that farmers are able to produce the kind of quality and quantity that is required.
Okay, you talked about the cotton production capacity.
Yes.
Are there any sufficiency gaps, or what would you say are the sufficiency gaps that are there?
Well, I mean, we are noticing, especially as we have commenced this intervention. What we see, for instance, is that the farmers, in terms of sufficiency in what they are getting, in inputs and so on and so forth, there's still some gap, particularly in training, particularly in extension services. For the GINAs, you know, when it comes to the GINAs, you talk about maybe the quality of cotton, type of cotton that will not damage their equipment, the way that the farmers harvest, and that would not, you know, include putting stones and other objects in the cotton, which you can't see, but you only experience when you are ginning. And then the textiles, obviously, having the type of quality cotton that they need to produce certain fabrics and all that. So, yes, there are such gaps, but I think they are being closed down slowly but surely.
What about the issue of funding?
Yes.
Would you say funding is such a major issue for cotton farmers, and how is it being handled?
I would say it's a major issue because, I mean, the activity itself is you require money. You require money to do it. And in the past, for instance, farmers left on their own may not be able to afford the recommended quantity of fertilizer, for instance, which is 7 bags per hectare. Farmers will struggle to make even up to 3 bags per hectare. So, but with the intervention through the Anchor Borers program, farmers are getting the 7 bags per hectare. So it's a major component, but it's not the only component. Extension services are key. We shouldn't leave farmers on their own. We should also come in with extension workers that would guide them, especially under this atmosphere of climate change now. So they need to understand, you know, the climate and how to also be able to address.
Okay. Still on funding, we tend to have a crisis of textile industries closing up and so on. Do you see funding helping to, you know, solve that problem of closing textiles and then having more textile factories coming in?
Yes, like I said, you know, funding is a major component. But if you look at the entire CTG sector, the value chain, it's not just funding, but there are some policies that need to be designed, developed, and implemented.
What would be those?
Well, for instance, let's say policy against smuggling or addressing smuggling, which, for instance, I'm happy to say that CBN took the bull by the horn by identifying smugglers and placing a post-no debit on their accounts so they can't operate. And CBN went further and not say, let's not send them packing, so to speak. Let's call them in. Let's have discussions with them. Let's see how they can now, instead of sending their funds outside and bringing in textiles or as maybe used textile materials or fabrics or clothing, let them see, well, let's see how we can encourage them to invest in country or to patronize the other existing textile industries. So, and obviously with the partial closure, that has also helped to fight smuggling and dumping.
Okay. What would you say is the current size of the industry, and then what is the potential of the industry?
Well, the current size in terms of value, I would say over a 3 trillion naira. With the investments in the past, the ones that are going on at the moment, is over a trillion. And you could easily, I think that can generate over 3 to 4 trillion going forward. That's the potential of the industry. But also to talk about the impact in terms of job creation, over 2 million easily. To talk about wealth creation, because if you are assisting the farmers to grow more and better cotton, then they should have better value for their produce. So all that wrapped up, I think it's
Are you worried or concerned about foreigners coming in to invest in the cotton industry in Nigeria?
No, I'm not. And I don't think anybody really should be worried. Because in the first instance, that's what we want. Instead of you producing and dumping in our economy, come and set up. And the benefit of that, obviously, is that we have our citizens engaged. So we're not worried at all. I think the setup of the industry as is able to compete with any foreign company that comes in.
Okay. Let's take a last question. What would you want as the way forward for the cotton industry in Nigeria?
Well, I think, you know, so far, I think the intervention is in the right direction. Because it's an ecosystem that has been created by the central bank, a value chain approach, which means that now, whether we like it or not, we're forced to work with the GINAs as cotton farmers. The GINAs are forced to work with the textile companies, and the textile companies with the garments. Now, if you see what the CBN has done, which is a major milestone, is to actually say, okay, we're funding the entire value chain, and we're now giving you a market. That's by tying our uniform services to the end product, so to speak. So I think, for me, we should continue. We should look at the possibility of expanding, because, like I said, Nigeria can become #1 in cotton production in Africa. Not only in West Africa, but in Africa. So,
of course, that is very possible.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Anibe Achumugu, President of the National Cotton Association of Nigeria, for coming on the program again today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The Small and Medium Enterprises Development Agency of Nigeria, SMEDAN, is spearheading the institutionalization of business development service providers certification and accreditation program in Nigeria. Managing Director of the agency, Umaru Rada, says equipping small and medium business owners with the requisite knowledge will help to de-risk the sector in line with the aspiration to fully diversify the economy.
The country has witnessed a lot of issues concerning the quality of the BDS which was provided to the MSME. And we want to give a stop to that by having a competent professional bodies to train and then commence certification of the BDSPs.
To this end, the agency will be partnering with the Enterprise Development Center of the Pan-Atlantic University, Lagos and Kaduna Business School towards coordinating and executing the institutionalization process of the business development service providers to allow Nigerians to have competent and reliable individuals and firms as business development service providers. Now, Nigerian Economic Summit Group NESG says the nation's economy can become globally competitive if it can let go of subsidies and channel the money into infrastructure development and investment. A member of the group's board, Udeme Uford, said, and noting that a lot of policies supported by the NESG had been implemented, even though it was not at the desired pace, and added that NESG will continue to dialogue and ensure the growth of the Nigerian economy. The dollar traded near a 3-week low against the yen on Friday before a U.S. employment report expected to show a slowdown in job creation. And on the capital market, the Nigerian Stock Exchange closed in red. The NSE All Share Index depreciated by 0.22% to close at 26,297.14 basis points. Market volume was at 241.5 million, while the value was 3.6 billion naira, while market capitalization stood at 12.77 trillion naira. Flour Mill, WAPCO and Access were the top gainers for the day, while Nestle, Nigerian Breweries, Stanbic led the losers for the day. The financial industry led the activity chart, and it recorded the highest number of traded shares, led by Zenith Bank, UBA and Guarantee Trust Bank. Meanwhile, stocks in Asia traded cautiously Friday amid renewed concerns over the potential for a long-term trade deal between China and the U.S. Over to Amina Nujem for details.
Stocks in Africa Friday showed mixed sentiments across board. On the positive side, Nairobi OSHA Index advanced 2.78%. Tunisia's Tunidex rose 0.23%, while Namibia Overall Index moved up 0.34%. On the flip side, South Africa's JSE Top 40 and Ghana's JSE Composite Index were down 0.22% and 0.05%. Now in the United States, the latest stock market valuation measures contained both good and bad news for the stock market. In the meantime, the Dow Jones declined by 0.52% in early trading. The Nasdaq Composite fell 0.14% to post a figure of 8,292 points, while the S&P 500 declined 0.30%. European stocks advanced on Friday after surprisingly strong Chinese data, with key reports on the U.S. economy due to be released. The DAX was up 0.37%, gaining 12,914.04. FTSE 100 advanced 0.28 to post 7,267.45, while CAC 40 also inched up 0.28%. The Chinese economy struggles as consumer cuts back on spending. The Hang Seng Index rose 0.72% to stand at 27,100.76. Now, Japan's main Nikkei index closed higher Friday as Asian stocks cautiously rise amid fresh trade deals doubts. The Nikkei index ended lower by 0.33% at 22,850.77, while the Shanghai advanced 0.99% to post 2,958.20. That's Global Market Reports.
Gold prices were little changed on Friday as investors evaluated whether the Federal Reserve would continue to cut rates. Let's see prices. And that brings us to the end of this edition of Business Express. You can access all previous episodes on YouTube, and you can communicate with us on Twitter. The handle is @NTA News Now. The hashtag is BizX. We value your feedback, so keep the mails coming and join us again next week, Monday, for another episode of the program. I am Muplang Dakok saying, as always, that you should keep doing business.